And then with that, disclaimer, this presentation was produced and funded in whole with federal funds from the U.S. Department of Education under contract number GS10F0112J with the American Institute for Research. Carolyn Limpia serves as the contracting officer's representative. The content of this presentation does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of the U.S. Department of Education, nor does the mention of trade names, commercial products, or organizations imply endorsement by the U.S. government. With that, I'll hand it over to our moderator, Marcella.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today on our webinar, HyFlex Instruction in Adult Education Settings, Overview, Examples, and Learning Discussion. We have with us today Jen Vanek from World Education and Sheryl Hart from the Arizona Department of Education. I'll tell you a little bit more about them in just a moment. But before we do that, I wanted to share with you a little bit about our webinar series. If we can go to the next slide, Long. Thanks. So today's webinar is part of our Universal Technical Assistance Webinars series. This is a monthly series on topics that matter most to the field. I know HyFlex is of high interest to many, and that's why we're here, right? So the series supports states in building their capacity in important areas. Our webinars are recorded and available on the Links YouTube channel. So please be sure to check back there if you missed part of today's session, or if you have a colleague who wanted to join and didn't get a chance, those will be available for you there. Okay. So before we get started, I do want to introduce you to our wonderful presenters in just a moment. But before we do, I wanted to tell you about a couple of resources that we have available for you through links that are related to this topic. First, within our links resource collection, we have the Ideal Distance Education and Blended Learning Handbook, 7th edition. If you haven't checked it out, it's wonderful and really helpful and practical. If you would like to continue today's discussion with others who are interested in the same topic, I encourage you to check out our links community, specifically the Integrating Technology group, where you'll find discussions on this and other related topics. With that, I'd like to introduce our two presenters today. We have Jen Vanek. And let me tell you a little bit about Jen. She is the Director of Digital Learning and Research at the EdTech Center at World Ed. She is a researcher, teacher, educator, and professional learning facilitator who focuses on digital literacy, online learning, classroom technology integration, and English literacy and language learning. Jen directs communities of practice that support adult education practitioners and administrators to develop high-quality educational opportunities for adult learners. This work rests on her past and current research, which includes field testing educational technologies and exploring how adult learners develop digital literacy and employ technology in their academic learning. We also have with us today Sheryl Hart. For those of you who don't know her, she is the State Director of Adult Education in Arizona. I guess her official title is Deputy Associate Superintendent. She has worked in the field of adult education for over 30 years as a teacher, local program director, and in the state office. Prior to becoming state director in July 2014, she focused on the integration of educational technology in adult education classrooms throughout Arizona and oversaw the design and implementation of Arizona's statewide adult education distance and hybrid learning system. In addition to being Arizona's state director, she serves as the immediate past chair of the National Association of State Directors of Adult Education. And with that, enough from me. Let me turn it over to Jen.
Hello, everyone. It's great to see so many familiar names in the participant list. And I just want to thank Marcella and Sheryl and Long for having us here today. So the next hour or so, we're going to spend doing an overview of what we know about hybrid flexible instruction and give some examples of early implementation in adult ed programs in the US. I'll be covering those two chunks, and then Sheryl will spend some time talking about what's happening in Arizona, policy practice, and what data are showing from their early implementations. And then we hope to have an open discussion to just hear about some ideas or help you think through. You could ask questions about how you're going to move, how you can move your state forward with HyFlex, use of the HyFlex model. Next slide, please. Okay, so we want to see what you know first. So I am hoping that you will all participate in what's called a waterfall chat. So waterfall chat is different than just engaging in chat because you're going to wait until I say go to actually hit return. So you're going to reflect on the question here. What is HyFlex for just a minute or so? Actually write your answer in the chat, but don't hit return. And then I'll say return and everybody will do it all at once. And the reason we do it this way is so that you can have your own reflection and not be distracted by what others are saying. And then we can just kind of scoot through them to get some high level understanding about what you were all thinking independently. So I'm going to give you a minute. Please reflect on the question, what is HyFlex? And add your comment to the chat box. Okay, go ahead and hit enter, and we'll see what we have coming in here. All right. Face-to-face, synchronous, combined, synchronous, asynchronous, virtual, in-person all at once, combination of different modalities, and flexible based on student needs. Student voice and choice. That's a great way to put it. Yeah, these are great to see. Conducting a class virtually and in person simultaneously. Very common understanding of HyFlex. Yeah, so it looks like we're on the right path. We're all kind of thinking about this similarly. Can we go to the next slide, please? So for the rest of this call, I'm going to give you a framing that I hope will help you understand how we at the EdTech Center at World Ed are talking about HyFlex. Our understanding of HyFlex is certainly not reified within our context yet. Like, we are not definitely saying these words and all meaning the same things, but I think we should strive to getting there, so that when we talk about HyFlex and professional learning opportunities like this, or when we read research about HyFlex, we all are starting from a shared understanding, and then are able to take the work more easily into, the daily work of teaching and learning. So what I think, and what I think is really useful, is this seminal work by a scholar at University of California, San Francisco, Brian Beatty, who has done some of the earliest work researching HyFlex implementation in higher ed. It's true, higher ed in California. And this is the definition that you can find in this wonderful book that Long has just chatted the link to. So hybrid, combining both online, asynchronous, and live instruction that's either remote or in person at any time. And then flexible is students actually get a choice to decide how they are going to engage in that hybrid learning. So we get hybrid and flexible together is HyFlex. So if we could go to the next slide. I think like a visual is helpful here. Actually, the last time I talked about this, I didn't have the visual, and I was like, oh no, we need to definitely juice this up with a little bit of a visualization. So you see, we have two sides of the screen here, synchronous and asynchronous. And then within the synchronous side, there are two different ways to think about synchronous instruction. So that's either in person, like students sitting in a classroom, or students participating remotely. The thing that we often notice is that the asynchronous part is not intentionally integrated in early implementation of HyFlex. And that's just fine. You're going to hear a little bit about the work of a teacher who definitely started more on the left side of the screen with the two synchronous modalities. But it is true that BD thinks about HyFlex as having all three of these modalities present. And if you think about it, like to be most flexible, you actually do need to allow flexibility around time as well as place. So that's what the asynchronous component allows for. Next slide, please.
We have a polling question. Did you want me to go ahead and
Oh yeah, go ahead and put up the poll. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
So which of these modalities do you currently have in your state or your program? And you can check all that apply. Let's see where your program is in terms of HyFlex implementation. So we'll give you a minute. All right. Have they slowed down?
Almost. I'll give about another 15 seconds.
Okay.
All right. I think I'll go ahead and share the results.
Okay, so we've got synchronous in person, synchronous remote, and asynchronously at a distance. I love that. So that's actually much more asynchronous than I thought. And what I'm wondering is if anybody cares to respond, is that asynchronous at a distance? Is that integrated into the synchronous aspects of it, or is this like a separate distance ed option? So feel free to chat. Is it all integrated into a comprehensive teaching and learning experience, or are we talking more about like separate distance education that's just a different thing? Okay, thanks, Ryan. Anybody else? Separate? Okay, we got a couple people talking about separate. Anybody else? Both, a combination, separate? Okay, a little bit of both. That's really, thank you so much for sharing. A point that you're going to notice soon, and when I show you this example, is having a separate distance learning is a step in it's the first step in the direction of creating a more holistic HyFlex experience for your students. So the fact that you're already doing distance learning is going to help you get there. All right, so now next slide. Before we get into some examples, I just want to highlight a few high-level points from BD's research. And essentially, these are the key characteristics that BD recommends being evident in all HyFlex instruction: learner choice, reusability of resources, equivalency of what is being taught across those three modalities, and then accessibility of all resources and class options. So let's dive into each of these just a little bit more. If we go to the next slide. So first, let's talk about learner choice. So the primary reason you would choose to do HyFlex is to give students choice about how they engage in the learning activities in any given week or across all the content in any given topic. And so without meaningful choice, there is actually no flexibility. If you're assigning everything, it's not really HyFlex because it's not flexible. It's not a bad thing to not have that flexibility. It's just not HyFlex. So choosing this principle, this characteristic, means that the instructors actually value choice as a key component of their planning, and that students are introduced to this choice in a way that is perhaps scaffolded so that they don't feel overwhelmed and they actually feel like this is a legitimate choice to them. Then speaking about equivalency, simply all of the different activities that are offered across 3 modalities need to kind of cover the same thing. They don't need to cover it in the same way, but they need to cover the same objectives and have hopefully equivalencies in terms of engagement opportunities. So for example, maybe the teacher has decided to have an asynchronous option of recorded snippets of their descriptions or explanations, and just have that as the asynchronous opportunity. But if the students in class had a chance to actually ask questions and discuss and respond to that explanation when it was being recorded, the students who are listening later also need to be afforded that same opportunity to engage with the learning through some kind of engagement. It could be like a Kahoot or a Quizlet or a response activity in Google Docs, but they need to have some sort of equivalent activity to respond. Next slide, please. So let's talk a tiny bit about reusability. It is absolutely the case that teachers can reutilize artifacts across these modalities, so that they're not completely remaking materials each time they're introducing a modality. So I just gave you an example maybe of how a teacher could record you could record a presentation or an explanation, and then use that as a reusable artifact. It doesn't mean you have to record the students that are listening to you in person or online synchronously, but just pulling that audio and video from the teacher presentation could be the reusable artifacts. And this is actually like reusability within a topic, but also across a plan. So if you had like a routine that you had integrated or you'd created that could be introduced and then used once, could be pulled up and used again. And then, of course, accessibility is important. You need to make sure that students have all the technologies that they need and know how to use them and have access to supports in order to help them use them throughout the term. And as you're layering new technology tools or platforms, all of that support and scaffolding is provided each and every time to keep everything truly accessible. Okay, so next slide, please. So now we're going to do a little bit of another poll. I've just introduced these 4 characteristics from Beatty's research, which are evident in, which do you think of these 4 are most challenging for your program to implement? And we'll give you a minute with this.
All right, it looks like they've slowed down, and so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results.
Okay, equivalency. We have a minute or two here. I would love to hear from someone who put down equivalency about why it's a challenge, or what you've seen from teachers, if you're supporting teachers, or if you're a teacher in the classroom, if you've tried to strive for this. What has been the challenge, or how has it been a challenge, or maybe how are you trying to overcome it? Feel free to chat and answer. Is the problem a lack of technology? Is it timing? Is it time to plan? Is it PD on how? What of those things might describe why equivalency is a challenge? Peer learning, yeah, student to student engagement can definitely be a challenge. Students using tools, self-regulating for the asynchronous aspect of it, whether or not they can persist. using technology to basically, yeah, using technology to be an equivalent for in-person connection. Yeah. And differentiated instruction, right? Okay, thanks. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and I think what strikes me here is a lot of these challenges around equivalency are some of the same challenges that we heard from programs as they were imagining and how to provide quality pandemic at instruction at a distance during the pandemic. Yeah, so thanks for sharing that. Okay, next slide. All right, so what I'm going to do now is share some information that has come to me from a really talented teacher named Jennifer Duclos. With Jennifer's permission, I'm sharing this. In the summer of 2021, I began working with a group of Arizona educators to explore HyFlex together. I mean, this is new for all of us, and we're all learning as we're going here. Jennifer was one of the teachers that I connected with. And we used Brian Beattie's book and created basically a book club or a study group where we went through each of the chapters every couple of weeks and then got together to talk about it. And then these teachers all talked about how they would take ideas from that chapter and put them into a pilot for their program. So one of these teachers was Mesa Adult Education's Jennifer Duclos. And she just had some really insightful approaches to thinking about how to take what she saw in Beattie's book and apply it into growing her HyFlex program. So next slide, please. All right, so what is interesting to me about Jennifer's work is that she was really clear that she needed to start with where she was. And she needed to start with her own instruction and her own classroom, and in fact, just one class, and then learn from that and grow from there. What you see on the slide here is actually a little infographic that Jennifer made for a session that we had, a distance education strategy session that we ran in last December. There's actually a link on the slide, and I bet Long could maybe chat that, or I can chat that later. If you want to hear her talking about this directly, you could listen to the webinar. But what you see here is that basically, the HyFlex started out with just in her classroom, and now HyFlex is being used widely at Mesa Adult Ed. And the way that was, the reason that was possible is that they didn't decide they were just going to flip on a switch and have program-wide HyFlex all at once. We started with Jennifer, and she made instructional shifts within her own classroom that helped the program understand what structural shifts were needed in the framing of classes, any of the classes individually, or then all of them together. And as they were making some of those changes, they were then able to really create a cultural shift at Mesa, which has made it sort of, and there's this understanding that there is broad access or wide access to HyFlex instruction in their programs. So the experimentation in the classroom with Jennifer led to these structural changes and really nurtured cultural shifts at the institution as more and more staff got involved in helping to understand how beneficial HyFlex can be for students. So it's a gradual thing. It's like a ripple. You throw a stone in a pond, and it's the ripple effect that leads to actual cultural shift and change and dedication of resources to make HyFlex possible. So the next point I want to make on the next slide about Jennifer's implementation, which I think is really useful, is that her course design and weekly planning is done with an eye to attending to the characteristics that Beattie wrote about. So when Jennifer talks about the evolution of her HyFlex work, it's really clear that she's working within a framework to support continuous improvement, because she's constantly looking to see, how is she meeting accessibility needs? How is she providing learner choice? What reusability is she leveraging? And how is she doing all of using those three things to support equivalency? So she actually started with what you see on the left. Like a lot of, like what I noticed in the chat, a lot of people said, yes, HyFlex, we're doing mostly synchronous and asynchronous live, or sorry, synchronous live and live remote and in person. And starting with equivalency in that area is a really excellent place to start. And then you can layer in asynchronous as you go, which is exactly what happened at Mason and Jennifer's classroom. So in the current iteration, or at least this iteration that was reported in, reported in December, you can see that there is still structure, and there's still a requirement for 6 hours of participation synchronously. But then the asynchronous part is, and then this, like what you see in the middle, which is actually just labeled homework here. And then the lab work, which is an optional synchronous support, make up for the rest of the learning. And there's flexibility there. So students do have choice. It's not all choice for students in this iteration, but they definitely have choice when it comes to what's happening in the red and the brown columns here. And the reason I think this is really excellent, like an excellent example of how you can wade into increasing flexibility for learners, is that it doesn't just happen all at once. They're literally like growing into this, picking up their current programming and figuring out how it fits into HyFlex. So, these asynchronous assignments with the self-paced online and proprietary platforms could have once just been like their distance learning program, but they're starting to make more and more connections that are tying this to their synchronous instruction. So it's a gradual process, but yet they still have these options across these three columns that definitely provide flexibility and make it possible for learners to work at their own pace, grow and learn at their own pace, and personalize their learning through choice. So next slide, please. All right, so with an eye to Beatty's model, Jennifer is using this framework again to gauge the progress she's making to deliver quality and relevant HyFlex instruction. So for example, here, this is actually a slide that's based on a slide that was shared in December. She's using each of these areas, and this red text here is her own assessment of where she was in December with these things. So around accessibility, they were developing, meaning they were making progress in resolving classroom technology issues, making sure students had devices, and making sure both students and teachers had access to tech skill workshops so that they could use all of those technologies. Around learner choice, they definitely, as you saw in the previous slide, had options for student decision-making. They were minimizing preference for in-person class by making sure that those asynchronous and remote options were high quality. And increased homework. She's saying homework. What she means is the asynchronous online part, providing more options, which is great in Arizona, because Arizona allows both proxy contact hour for proprietary curricula licensing, but then also has a very robust model for use of teacher verification model, which is really beneficial for something like this. And then just, constantly tapping into those policy decisions to add more asynchronous class options. With respect to reusability, they're also making progress. They've increased familiarity with, for teachers and learners alike, with all the different resources that they have available to them. Teachers are sharing. There's a library of resources, and they're also sharing Canvas course templates. In terms of equivalency, she felt like they still were, in December at least, they still needed more student data to assess how the equivalency was playing out. But they were in the process of putting together learning outcomes checklists and then looking toward using some standardized test results to understand how they were doing there. Next slide, please. So you've heard about one example and a very thoughtful approach from a teacher who is using a framework to both organize the HyFlex model that they're using and then also use it to gauge their progress. And I just want to provide you two other quick examples before I turn it over to Sheryl. Together with Destiny Simpson and David Rosen, I'm writing a guide to HyFlex instruction. And as part of that process, we have been interviewing practitioners and state level leaders across the US. A number of you I'm sure saw the survey. Some of you have probably participated in it. And we've been hitting on some really fascinating examples of early implementation. So I want to share two with you right now. The first I want to talk about is with Santa Barbara Community College, the School of Extended Learning. If any of you listened into our remote ESOL webinar, instructional research webinar, it was about a year ago, we did this massive survey to find out what people were doing with remote instruction over the pandemic. And one of the things that we learned was that at Santa Barbara, they'd really focused on offering a range of intensity in the programming that they were offering. And what was really, and then they also responded to the questionnaire about the HyFlex models. And in interviewing Sajko, Patricia, and Monica, it was really clear that they had found a way to take these remote instruction models and sustain their goal of offering options with varying intensity using HyFlex. So they are using HyFlex for their integrated education and training courses, their vocational training courses. And they're also integrating HyFlex into their less formal, on the less formal end or the less intense end with their learning circles. So they're not just looking at HyFlex as something that you get if you are, to offer more flexibility for their IET students or the IEL Civic students. They're also thinking about how can even these learners who are engaged in learning circles have more flexibility? So they're integrating HyFlex across all of these different types of programming. The other really interesting example, I think, comes from New Hampshire Department of Ed, and Sarah Wheeler is using the HyFlex model in new professional development opportunities. So this kind of came across, it became really clear to her the power of offering remote instruction during the pandemic, but also before, where they would have teachers not be able to show up because of the distance that they had to travel. And then it was through offering remote PD during the pandemic that she saw the power of not requiring travel. And so she's adding on to that now by adding this asynchronous component to the professional development. So they very soon will have a robust Canvas shell available to house or document almost all of the professional learning that they're doing. So there will be in-person live. There will be the option for people to call in or Zoom in. And then she's also recording this stuff and creating online engagement activities in Canvas so the teachers for whom the time didn't work can actually earn the credit for doing it on their own and on their own time. And she's documenting time and engagement through Canvas. So she's maximizing flexibility and increasing the number of teachers who are able to take part in the professional learning. I want to say one other thing about this. When Sarah Sarah actually did her own training on HyFlex to become a HyFlex educator. And the tip that she said she found most interesting from that training was, if you're serious about flexibility, you'll start by designing the asynchronous component first. So taking your objectives, that you want to cover in all three modalities, starting by designing the asynchronous component and then design the other two. All right, so my last slide, I believe. I've got two more. If you want to learn more, please check out the resources here. We can chat the links to them. And final last slide. Sorry, Sheryl, I think I'm tripping over my time a tiny bit. less, oh yeah, so we've got choosing technology for HyFlex. It's a webinar from David Howden, also from Arizona, who will talk about the technologies he's used. And then another teacher from Arizona at Pima talks about her early implementation in this blog post. High level findings for me on the next slide. Build gradually, start by thinking about learning objectives and then plan around them. Please try not to neglect the asynchronous part and provide ample PD along the way. Thank you so much for your time. And I think we should go right to Sheryl without a Q&A here. If you chat questions, I can answer them.
Thank you, Jen. I think I have plenty of time. So if there are any questions, that would be fine. So going back to my part in this. So I really, first of all, I really appreciate Jen sharing what she shared first, because she shared from the educator perspective really well, and an Arizona educator. So thank you for sharing about Jennifer Duclos. What I'm going to be talking about is specifically from the state perspective, and kind of how this HyFlex implementation is going from the state level perspective. So you can go to the next slide, Lon. So from Arizona's perspective at the state office, why are we implementing HyFlex and promoting that? What have we seen as the initial successes, and definitely the challenges? What kind of support are we providing through the state, and what are our policies that help support this implementation? And then I'm also going to share some preliminary outcome data. And I do want to point out that this is, it is definitely preliminary. We're still in the initial stages. We've had some implementation that has been going on for most of the program year, but a lot of it is still fairly new. So we don't have solid data, but I want to share what we have from a preliminary perspective. So you can go ahead to the next slide. So why HyFlex? So Jen discussed why HyFlex from both the learner and perspective. I'm going to talk about why Arizona programs started moving to HyFlex, which is definitely connected to what the learners need. So it definitely, you see a little diagram of COVID there on the slide of the COVID virus. It definitely came about during pandemic times, when just about all instruction was being provided virtually. My state staff started detecting some interest among teachers as they were working with teachers in exploring a HyFlex model. And the realization that while we actually lost a lot of enrollment during the pandemic, but there was also the recognition that for some students, they were able to attend more, and they had an easier time attending because everything moved. They had access to virtual instruction, and when there was a requirement to attend face-to-face, they just couldn't. They had a lot of barriers to attending class regularly in a face-to-face model. So we did learn a lot during the pandemic about what some students need. And so the interest in the HyFlex model began to surface. So you can go to the next slide. So what happened next? And I also want to point out that I have two staff people, I believe, are attending here. It's Corina Kashor and Marilyn Anderson. And they are actually the ones who probably should be talking instead of me, because when I say we did this, I'm actually talking about they were the ones that did this. So Corina and Marilyn, if you feel that you want to chime in, please feel free to unmute and correct me or add to anything that I'm saying. But what one of the first things that we did was conduct a survey in May of 2021 to determine what is the actual level of local interest in implementing HyFlex model. So sometimes, you know, you might be like 1 or 2 teachers want to do it, but there isn't broad interest. But actually the survey results came back, and that little pie, this little screenshot of the pie chart that's on there shows what the actual survey results were. But 50% of our, and we have 20 providers in Arizona, so 10 said that they intended to pilot at least one HyFlex class in the next program year, which is this year, 2021-2022. And then we had you know, close to just over a quarter that said no, they're not intending to. So you can go ahead to the next slide. So I'm going to call this initial successes. We actually had all of those providers that expressed interest on that survey have indeed launched 1 or more HyFlex pilot classes. And in fact, one of them, one of the programs, and that would be MESA that Jen referenced with the teacher Jennifer Duclos, one of them is implementing HyFlex in all of the classes. So we definitely count that as a success. You can go ahead to the next slide. Another success is that teachers are reporting that students are expressing appreciation for the HyFlex model. So flexible models are needed, and it is not just due to the pandemic. Teachers are reporting that students, because they're juggling so many work and family responsibilities, they need the choice, or they may prefer one way or another. But it's not just a preference. A student may prefer face-to-face, but they need to attend virtually because of various things like work schedules or family obligations. Another student may prefer to attend virtually, but then they realize they're butting their head up against the wall and they need to come in person and get face-to-face help on occasion. So having this model implemented has been really successful for getting students what they need, and not just what they prefer, but what they need. So you can go to the next slide. Another success that we've seen is that we're seeing technological improvements pretty much across the board, across the state, and it's carrying over program-wide, not just in HyFlex classes. So we've seen seen increases in technology lending programs, increase in usage of learning management systems to support students in all modalities, which we've been trying to get programs to adopt for quite some time. And while they're working to implement the HyFlex model, this is starting to occur really broadly. We've seen programs increase their investments in classroom technologies and that, things such as cameras, headsets, and microphones. So all of those are growing program-wide. Next slide. So another success that my state staff has told me, and these are the ones that are working directly with programs, is that they're beginning to get training requests now that are going beyond how to get started. So we, the way our state staff is structured is every local program knows that Corina and her team are, they specialize and they focus in educational technology and distance and blended learning. And so they can reach out, local programs can reach out and ask for technical assistance or specific training. And so we're starting to see things, and it's going like, it's going beyond how do we get started. The examples that I were given was they're getting requests for how can we use ESL Pro strategies with Burlington English, or how can we use Khan Academy to support instruction? So they're really starting to go deep into doing some really high quality implementation. And as you can tell by Jen's part of this presentation, these teachers are leading the way. So she mentioned Jennifer Duclos from Mesa, David Howden from our ACYR program, and Vi Haas from Pima Community College. I believe all of them also presented at COABE recently. They are doing presentations in state for other teachers. So these educators are leading the way, and it's almost feeling like we're going over the tipping point where it's growing through these educators supporting other educators. So I wanted to make that point. Before we go on, Karina or Marilyn, do you have anything that you want to add as far as what teachers are doing?
I think you're doing a great job, Sheryl. Thank you. Marilyn, do you want to talk about any specifics that are in the training that you developed?
I'm not sure. You're doing a great job, Sheryl. I just think a lot of our questions are starting to be looking at, like how do we get our students engaged in both modalities, and looking at those types of questions. And that's something I love to hear as a state here. So.
Thank you. Thank you. And I didn't tell them that they had to say that I was doing a good job, but I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, you can go on to the next slide. So there are ongoing challenges. And I think one of the big ones, and this is not a surprise to anyone, the digital divide is real, and it is deep, and it is wide for some of our students. So we have students that struggle with access, not just with technology, but with connectivity, Wi-Fi. And we have programs that are trying a lot of different strategies to address that. It is still a struggle especially in certain areas of our state. And I think that's one of the things that really came to the surface during the pandemic, was that when many of our students were relying on computer labs. So even if they were attending asynchronously or remotely, they needed access to a computer lab in order to do that. And when that went away, it really had an impact on their ability to participate. In addition, is the skill level of students and how able they are to use the technology that's needed to do, to do online coursework. And so we have, those are real challenges for some students, and our programs are coming up with strategies to address those challenges. Go on to the next slide. Another challenge is that success is often very dependent on the technical ability of the teacher and their willingness to take risks and their ability to adapt and adjust. So I know that just thinking about doing a HyFlex approach seems pretty daunting. And so I think that it takes a special kind of teacher to really say, I'm going to jump in there and I'm going to start doing it. And you kind of got to feel, as Jen was describing Jennifer Duclos, and how she's like, she felt the need to start where she was and then grow her instructional strategies from there, I think is a really good approach, because it can feel like being thrown into the deep end, and that would be very scary to do if you don't know how to swim. So or if you only know how to dog paddle. So I think there's so one of the things that we've learned is there definitely needs to be additional training and hefty onboarding processes for teachers so that they can learn to navigate the digital and instructional needs of this modality and feel comfortable. Now, I've always said in adult education, in some ways we're lucky. Our students are adults. We can relate to them as adults. Teachers don't have to be perfect. And in fact, in almost any classroom, you're going to have some adult students that know more about a topic or something than the teacher does. And I think that's fine. I think we embrace that in adult education. But still, nobody wants to have to start doing something when they don't have the when they don't know what they're doing, or they feel uncomfortable with their skill level. So it definitely requires additional training and onboarding. So you can go on to the next slide. Another challenge that we recognize is that smaller programs likely have less tech support. Well, they have fewer resources, and that would include less tech support and just resources in general than larger programs, or those programs that are attached to colleges or school districts. So this might make it more challenging to provide the HyFlex technology and instruction. If they don't have an IT department, if they have fewer funds to invest in technology, they have less access to trained personnel, it's going to be a heavier lift to implement the HyFlex model. And then I'll talk about what we're doing at the state level in a minute, but to speak to this, one of the things we did do is allocate additional resources to all of our programs that in response to the pandemic to help support the need for additional technology and that sort of thing. And so hopefully that was helpful to smaller programs, but there's definitely a difference between a large program being able to utilize an IT department or trained staff to help implement it, whereas a smaller program where people are wearing many hats and they're having to do it all on their own. All right, next slide. So looking at what state support did, and this is where I might check in again with Corina and Marilyn if they have something to add. One of the things that, well, we definitely, I said it was teacher-led and educator-driven, and it truly was, but at the state office, we definitely want to provide the support and resources that will help teachers be successful in doing this. So we not only need to get out of their way, but we also want to support as much as possible. So a training session was developed for support in this modality, and it covers the technology needed and teaching strategies for engaging both sets of students. Marilyn, did you want to add anything on the training session?
Yeah, that's like it covers kind of an overview. It's more of like an intro for HyFlex, and programs can request it. We have a training request form, so they can request it or email out to us. And I know we're in the beginning stages of talking about making like an on-demand option to support programs as they onboard new teachers and teacher rollover and change, so that they have a way to support them in that HyFlex modality.
Thank you, Marilyn. In addition to the training session developed, there's also several documents, infographics to support teachers. And some examples are getting started with HyFlex adding engagement with the HyFlex model, providing virtual feedback, smartphone design. I believe in a little bit we'll be sharing our state website, and you can go in and explore and look at the resources. And then the last one on this list is review and provide feedback on submitted tech plans. So all of our programs, and this has been the case for several years, are required to complete a technology plan. And so the process of developing the technology plan is intentional about giving space for programs to think through their process and determine professional learning needs around anything educational technology related. And that would include HyFlex, virtual, and blended learning. So the tech plans are read and evaluated by the ed tech team to provide feedback and technical assistance as needed. So this year, the tech plans were looked specifically at for those programs that said they were interested in implementing a HyFlex model to provide feedback to ensure that that their planning looks like it's got the support that's going to be needed to implement the model. And that would include training, professional learning, and technology resources. So I think that tech plan being submitted, reviewed by the state staff, and then feedback going back, that loop has been real successful in getting a handle on what's going on in local programs and helping us get an idea on what kind of support is needed. So that's been very instrumental with these programs that are working on implementing HyFlex. And by the way, we did not require that programs implement HyFlex. It's been purely in interested programs implementing it. Now down the road, we might look at really working with our programs to get across the entire state HyFlex implemented. Let's see, you can go on to the next slide. So other state supported or state provided support and resources include one-to-one technical assistance upon request, as Marilyn mentioned, and as I mentioned before, our local providers have a direct access to us. They can request things. Sometimes they don't request something, but it gets noticed. We do a lot of desk monitoring of our programs, and that would include reviewing reports that are submitted, but also looking at our data management system and doing desk monitoring of data. If an issue is identified through the data review process, we may request a one-on-one technical assistance activity with a local provider to offer assistance and also see, find out, what's going on with them and how we can move past challenges and that sort of thing. The other thing that I want to mention is the sandbox office hours. And Corina, I'm gonna see if you want to explain how the sandbox office hours work.
Sure. So we actually got the idea from Kentucky U, and basically, one of the people on the tech team will record a 30-minute or less video on a tech tool and why they would want to integrate it into their instruction and how to do so. And then they can watch that asynchronously 1 week, and then the following week, we will have different time slots throughout the day. Marilyn, Kenneth, and I have about three time blocks per week that teachers can pop in and out of to ask additional questions on that tech tool that was featured for that week, or any other questions they have about blended learning or any other tech tool that they're interested in.
Thank you. All right, you can go on to the next slide. So I'm going to talk about policies and policy changes that we have in Arizona, because I think this is one of the things where where the state figures in. Policies can sometimes get in the way of things. And I mentioned that one of the things we want to do is get out of the way, you know, and let the implementation happen. We want to provide support, but we definitely don't want to make barriers unless, of course, we have to due to, you know, state or federal law. But we already had some existing policies that we've had for quite a while that I think were very helpful in allowing HyFlex to become a viable model in Arizona. For one thing, all of our providers were already required to be offering blended learning with anytime, anywhere options for students. So we built that into our last grant contract, where blended learning had to be there for students. It's a little bit different than HyFlex, but by blended learning, we mean there has to be a synchronous and an asynchronous part of instruction. One of the things we've learned over the years of providing distance learning is that students, a one size fits all doesn't work for our students. Most of our students have employment that doesn't have regular schedules. Could you go back a slide? Okay, thanks. They may not have a regular schedule. So we've always recognized the need for there to be some asynchronous anytime, anywhere option for students. We also already have a distance learning policy that includes guidance on providing synchronous virtual instruction. Okay, now you can go to the next slide. This is the new policy that we implemented specifically to support HyFlex implementation. And that is, we asked our programs to use a naming convention to help us identify HyFlex classes in our data management system. It's kind of a workaround right now. We're hoping to get a revision in our data management system so that they can just select it a class as a HyFlex class. But right now they're having to name the class. They're having to, we ask them to put HF at the beginning of the class name. And then we can easily go through and identify all the classes that are specifically designed as HyFlex classes. I wouldn't say that they are 100% adhering to this naming convention, but it's definitely helped us get a handle on which classes are HyFlex classes. And because of that, and you can go to the next slide, because of that, we do have some preliminary data on these classes. So what you see on the screen is a screenshot of some data points. So I'll just go through each one of them. As I mentioned before, 50% of our providers right now are offering HyFlex classes. So in Arizona, that's 10 providers are offering one or more HyFlex classes. We actually have 471 classes in our data management system that are named as HyFlex classes. They're identified as HF. And that translates to 22% of all of our classes. The number of participants being served with HyFlex is right now 639, which represents 8% of students enrolled in a HyFlex class. Now, you might be thinking, well, 22% of the classes are HyFlex, so why aren't 22% of the students? I have some guesses on that. Karina and Marilyn, you can chime in if you want to. I'm thinking it's first of all, there may be fewer students, you know, as a teacher's getting going, and like I said, this is all very preliminary, you know, it's just getting rolling. As the teacher's getting rolling, they may have fewer students in the class. There's also some of these classes did not get implemented until later in the year. So they are up and running now, but they haven't had a full year of having students. I'm not sure if there's any other reasons why we're at 8% of our students that Karina, you or Marilyn can think of, but that's what I'm guessing. If you look at our attendance, we have, I'm going to take you to the, and I'll answer the question about proxy hours also. I'll take you to the bottom row. We have 44,250 total attendance hours. So 8% of our students are enrolled in HyFlex. 8% of their total attendance hours are from HyFlex classes. So that lines up. How does it break down? Almost 20,000 are face-to-face. 8% of total attendance is face-to-face. 6% are proxy hours, and then 10% are distance learning hours from HyFlex. Someone asked in the chat, I just happened to see it. I may have missed some other questions in the chat, and Long, you can let me know, or Marcella if I did. But proxy hours are online curriculum or curricular hours. It's that it's anytime, anywhere. It's an online curriculum. So in Arizona, we use Burlington English for our English language learners. And what do we use for? Oh, Marilyn's answering that. Attendance students earn asynchronously. Thank you. Jen mentioned that we also have a teacher verification model. So it doesn't have to be through an online curriculum. It could be through an instructional lesson that's provided asynchronously. And I guess the other online curriculum, we have several online curriculums, but the state provides two, Burlington English and My Foundation. And then we allow there's other things that we allow to be counted as proxy hours, including the teacher verification model. So I did not include on here anything on measurable skills gain. Oh, I see a question about distance learning. So instruction at a distance is, it would be synchronous instruction that's provided synchronously, but at a distance. So that's opposed to by proxy. So proxy is at a distance and at a different time, whereas instruction at a distance is same time, but different place. I didn't include on this chart our MSGs. As I said, we don't have a full year of data, but I did look at it, and I wanted to say verbally, even though it's not on the chart, that our MSGs for our HyFlex students is very, very close to our statewide MSG rate. It is a percentage point higher, just 1 percentage point higher at this point. So I'm not sure, you know, how that's going to play out at the end. We definitely will share that information once we've gone through a full program year and we look at those kind of outcomes. So the next slide has the links to the resources. It has our blended and virtual learning policy, a HyFlex infographic, a HyFlex choice board, digital tools for different access scenarios. And I think Long is putting those in the chat. And then I will, I can take any additional questions if there are any that I've missed.
as people are thinking about questions to ask Jen and Sheryl, if you want to save your chat so you can have the links available to you for later, and if you open the chat window, there are 3 dots at the bottom right of the chat window, and there's an option to save the chat. So just an FYI there for participants who again want to save it and have the links to the resources later.
Wow, Long, thank you. I didn't even know that I could do that to save the chat.
All right, as we're waiting for questions again, feel free to enter your questions into the chat or unmute yourselves and ask them out loud.
Sheryl, do you think you might be going back to ask the students after this first year of the HyFlex, what they think about it? And maybe
I think that's
just
a really great idea. And I think that our most of our programs do, survey their students. And so I think that would be a good idea for us to ask our programs to do that, survey their own students.
We do have a question from Stacy Downey. What are some of the modifications and or equipment purchases that were needed for Classroom to implement HyFlex?
So I'm going to let either Corina or I see Marilyn unmuted. I'm guessing she can answer that. And Jen probably can add to it also.
Yeah, that's a question we get a lot. Obviously, the biggest thing comes cameras and microphones became super important, both so they could hear the teacher for the students online, but also hear their classmates who are in person in the room and look at different camera options. But also it came with devices in the classroom. One of a great way to engage all the students is to allow the in-person students to also get online at times to engage with their online peers. And so there's been a push to implement some technology in the classroom so students have access to devices when they come to class. But those are kind of some things, but some teachers have implemented smart boards and a lot of other different tools. But I think the big thing came into play were cameras, microphones, and devices for students.
Jen, did you want to add anything?
I just chatted it. David's presentation is so great because he says, this is what I have, this is what I'm doing, this is what I want. So it really breaks it out.
Like we've said several times, this is teachers are pioneering this right now. It's very interesting to watch.
And if I could just add one thing that I've noticed, this is completely anecdotally, but we were able to do one in-person site visit in between the COVID numbers dropping and rising. And the excitement that the program director had around the technology they had invested in, I think it's called an owl, where the camera follows the teacher around in the classroom as she walks around. So they were excited to demonstrate that. We've also had program directors take pictures of their setup and send them in to us saying, hey, check this out, look what we got. So I think there's an excitement, not just at the teacher level, but also the director level around the implementation of technology and HyFlex model.
And I did mention, we did a one-time only additional grant allocation to our providers specifically to do, they could do various things like increase recruitment efforts and that sort of thing. But one of the things they could do is invest in technology.
Brenna and Jen and Sheryl, could you just help me think it out a little bit? Was it a matter of any student who wanted to do HyFlex and you could get them the equipment that they could do that? Or were you kind of picking and choosing certain students on certain levels? Or was it a kind of, let's see what works?
It was not us doing it, it was at the local program.
Right.
And it was a teacher making the decision that they were going to dive into implementing a HyFlex model. And so it would be whatever students were in that class or that registered for that class, knowing what that meant. So I would say it was probably during the registration process, a student would opt to register for a HyFlex class rather than another type of class. Now the getting the equipment to the students, I think, is a whole other that's a whole other challenge that I think. And as I mentioned, there's been an increase in equipment loaning programs and things like that, but I think that's still a challenge. There are I'm sure some students that would be really good candidates for HyFlex, but they don't have they don't have what they need to participate in that model.
So one more question I saw in the chat. What suggestions do you have for asynchronous learning for low literacy and S-Life English learners, so students with limited or interrupted formal education with English?
Well, I think there are a number of proprietary tools that claim to serve those learners well. I know that, Arizona, I mean, maybe Karina, you can speak to how Burlington is working out for that level of student in Arizona. I think if you're looking for something free, why not try USA Learns? It's got a really, it's open and free and mobile, and it's popular and in use in a lot of the programs that I've heard about. But we also have teachers who have been creating their own content. Like I'm thinking of this teacher, Nan Friedland in Connecticut, who put together a whole curriculum for her SLIFE literacy learners through WhatsApp and Google Slides. So you can do a lot on your own too.
Right, and for the sake of time, I'll go ahead and move to the next slide for the discussion.
So I'm going to turn it over to Marcella.
Yeah. Great. Thanks. So thank you, Jen, during today's session.
I'm not hearing Marcella very well. Is there?
Yeah, I'm not either.
Oh, sorry about that. Need to try.
Oh, there you go.
Sorry.
Now you're good.
Okay. All right. What is one thing you heard about during today's session you are excited to try?
So I think, Marcella, you're still breaking up a little bit. I'll go ahead. So discussion and guidance to move your state forward. What is one thing you heard about during today's session that you are excited to try? So again, feel free to unmute yourselves or type it into the chat.
And while people are doing that, I just want to answer a question that I just saw in the chat about the MSG attainment. I'm talking about table 4 and table 4C.
All right. And as people are typing into the chat, we'll go ahead and move on really quickly. Marcel, I don't know if you want to try to unmute yourself again and try to get the next slide. If not, I can take it really quickly.
I can try. I'll stay off camera.
Oh, I think this is me actually. So there is, if you want to engage in more conversation about this right now, David Rosen has started a Flex Models Google group that has very lively conversation. And if you are interested in participating in the conversation, email David if thank you. So I'm on this, I'm following it, and it is truly a responsive community where someone posts a question and they get an answer almost right away. We're taking a lot of the information from this and the interviews that David and Destiny and I have done to write the HyFlex guide, which will be coming out by the end of August, and will be an open access resource available to anybody who wants to use it for their own PD.
Thank you, Jen. And then really quickly, if you'd like continued support, are you interested in continuing support around this topic? So I'm going to put a poll question up really quickly. You should see it. And as we're closing out, I'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So again, links, training, and technical assistance opportunities. I'm going to add a couple links into the chat. So if you are interested in additional state resources that are on links, I've added the link state resources. Also a link if you'd like additional support on technical assistance, a survey form to fill out, again, to request those services. And if you have any additional questions, you can email us at training@links.ed.gov. And also upcoming, we have new links courses coming up. ACP, building strategic partnerships and engaging employers. ACP, building a bridge to adult career pathways, and instructional considerations for adult career pathways. And last, teaching adult English learners principles and practices.
Long, I just wanted to note these were actually already released, which is really exciting. So we encourage everyone to check those out. I wanted to share with you a little bit about next month's webinar. We'll be looking at supporting part-time teachers. The session will be held on May 25th. Our presenters will be Gail and Amy. Gail is the state director of Maine Adult Education, and Amy is professional development coordinator for the Office of Adult Education in Maine. We'll be meeting again from 3 p.m. Pacific. We encourage you to register now. It's going to be wonderful. And I do encourage you to try to make sure you can stay for that extra half hour. And to make sure, sorry, if we can go back to really quickly to the previous slide. Sorry, we want to make sure that we are meeting your needs with our webinar. So please let us know what questions you have about address those. All right, so with that, I want to thank all of you for attending today's webinar. Thank you again, Jen and Sheryl, for your wonderful presentations. I know from the chat that everyone found those to be incredibly interesting, and we have some great things to try out as we try to implement this. Thank you again for attending, and we hope you'll join us next month.